What do you mean by an experience operating system, which you call an XOS?
It's really a structured, holistic framework that helps operationalize experience management. You think about how an IT operating system helps to manage technology and data components. So many organizations do it well in particular parts of that organization. Rarely are those things linked together in a holistic way that integrates CX across the organization.
Hi, I'm Matt Egol, host of the CX and Culture Connection, the podcast for leaders looking to drive impact by focusing on customer experience and culture together. I'm excited to talk today to Michael Hinshaw, who is the founder and president of MCorpCX. Michael is the co-author of Experience Rules, the Experience Operating System, and 8 Keys to Enable It, for which I recently wrote a review. It was a great book. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Michael.
My absolute pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I've always enjoyed hearing you speak at events like CXPA and having a chance to interact, and it's great to have you on the podcast today. So I guess just to get us going, in the book, what do you mean by an experience operating system, which you call an XOS, and how do the 8 keys fit together to accelerate value from investments in customer experience?
We think about experience operating system. It's really a structured, holistic framework that helps operationalize experience management. I think about how an IT operating system helps to manage technology and data components. And when it comes to customer experience, what we've seen is that so many organizations do it well in particular parts of that organization, whether it's sales, service, IT, marketing, et cetera. But rarely are those things linked together in a holistic way that integrates CX across the organization. So when you think about the 8 foundational keys, things like strategy, design, culture, data, measurement, putting these together in a way that link silos ensures that CX is integrated across the organization. And you've heard many times the talk in the CX industry, so to speak, is we need to knock silos down. Well, the reality is that silos are in place for a reason, but what the experience operating system does is to help connect those silos in ways that make the customer journey essentially seamless across the organization rather than broken into the component parts.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, people write about or apply a maturity framework. In a way, the book has a maturity framework baked into it, but it's more than that because you're not creating just a one-time diagnostic tool that people can use to assess their maturity. You've created a framework, set of stories, set of applications that people can use for ongoing application, not a one-time exercise.
Yeah, that's the tool is XOS Pulse. And what that does, it's essentially an online assessment, but it's also, to your point, an ongoing assessment. So it's not a one and done because customer experience, like transformation, is never a one and done. Even though, what is it? Something like, okay, I'm going to get the math wrong because I'm not a math guy, but I think it's like 60% of organizations say, we're done with our transformation. It's like, really? It's like transformation does not stop.
Yeah, I think the word transformation makes it sound like it's a one-time event. And, like I like to make this distinction sometimes between like a project and a program. Like a project mentality is you have a steering team and there's a start and an end. And it's good to know like what the definition of done is and what you're trying to achieve. But really, like you're constantly on a journey and you're constantly evolving. So governance doesn't end. Your roadmap doesn't actually have an end. It's constantly updated and improved. So I like the way you think of it as an ongoing journey rather than a one-time exercise.
We use the analogy of, 2 analogies actually, safety and quality, right? And safety isn't something that you don't call the safety team after somebody's lost an arm in manufacturing, right? You have to have that baked into the organization. There has to be continual focus on doing that. Similar with quality. If the wheels fall off the truck, it's too late to bring the quality people in. So customer experience needs to be baked into the way the organization operates so that it isn't, exactly to your point, a one and done.
So one of the things you talk about in the book with Diane is how too few organizations actually link CX to outcomes. While there's a lot of emphasis in nearly all companies in measuring the voice of the customer, measuring experience, a lot of times those metrics are not tied to business outcomes, but are more just around survey metrics. Why do you think that is, and what leads companies to make that to kind of make that jump to actually having the connection to outcomes versus stopping short and just chasing survey scores?
I think part of that is there's a focus on what we call headline metrics, right? NPS, CSAT. It's really nice to hold those up and say to the board or the executive team, we've moved from 72 to 77 in the last quarter, or whatever that metric is. But to your point, those scores often, sometimes they are, but often are not linked to the business. So they're not linked to acquisition, retention, operating efficiency, margins, profit. And if we're able to, and those CX leaders that are most successful at actually making those linkages, we're saying, what do we do to our customers? How do they feel as a result of that? What do they do based on how they feel? And then what are the business metrics that those behaviors drive? And it seems a very logical linkage, but it's something that's difficult, I think, to do. And when I say difficult to do, meaning the data isn't always clean, which it never is. The inputs aren't always clear in terms of what inputs you need to figure that out. But the effort involved with making those linkages back to business objectives is well worth it. I mean, there's a reason that some CXOs end up in the C-suite, right? HubSpot being one example. I think Safelite Auto Glass is another. There's a handful where CX leaders absolutely link metrics to business results and are able to prove it consistently over time, including how they're able to move those numbers up.
What you're highlighting is different than doing, again, the difference between one time and ongoing. It's different than a driver's analysis, which many companies have done, which is what drives the NPS or drives the customer effort or CSAT score. And they do lots of analysis. And you might say there's 183 pain points, and there's all these are the things that drive our CX. And then you look at ways to play whack-a-mole to reduce those drivers but that treats the NPS or CSAT or CES, the golden metric, as the headline score. And what you're talking about is actually linking it to business outcomes that C-suite executives care about and driving linkage. So it's actually a more impactful way to track things on an ongoing basis versus a one-time driver's analysis.
And I mean, driver's analysis can be ongoing as well. It's not, right? It's the difference between one-off and systematized, hence the experience operating system, because it is a system. It's changing mindsets, it's enhancing and changing skill sets, it's changing tool sets. How do you give people the right skills, attitudes, and tools to do their jobs well? And how do you make sure that you as an organization continue to look around corners so you can see what's coming and make improvements before it's too late?
So how did you come up with the 8 keys, and how have you been applying them with the CXPA members and other clients?
Yeah. So the 8 keys, I think I mentioned, I'll just quickly hit on a few of them.
We can show them on screen right now, right? If you
Oh,
like.
perfect. There we go. Yep. So we've got strategy, alignment, accountability, otherwise known as the G word, governance, which is why we call it alignment and accountability rather than governance. Customer understanding, design innovation, measurement, business processes, technology and culture, or technology and data, and kind of lumped together, and culture. And we look at these, we call them 8 keys, but they're actually business capabilities. And then underneath each one of these, we have kind of level 2, next click down capabilities that ladder up to each of these 8 keys. And none of these are a surprise to any organization. It's like, oh, wow, governance? We didn't know we needed governance. Every organization has governance, whether it's planned or ad hoc, but there's a governance framework. And if we can link existing governance systems to the way that organizations manage customer experiences, for example, some organizations are further along that journey than others. Strategy and vision is another area. Strategy and vision is something that many executives say we want to be more, you can kind of pick your analogy, customer first, customer obsessed, right? Customer centric, whatever those strategic visions are, oftentimes they're stated, but they're not internalized. They're not shown in the ways that executives and leadership, walk and talk on an everyday basis. So no organization starts at the same place on any of those keys. And the goal of the 8 keys and the goal of the XOS Pulse is to help organizations see exactly where they stand. Like if they're very strong in data and technology, for example, but that data and technology linkage isn't shown in their culture or strategy or measurement. We need to find ways to link those together so we can leverage their strengths to bring other capabilities along.
So as you've, applied the pulse, both building the instrument and then now engaging CXP members and sharing results, like for example, at the Leaders Advance event that we both at, what are some of the key insights or lessons learned that you've taken away, kind of having a bird's eye view across lots of companies about where we are in XM and where are things now and where are some of the biggest gaps that you think organizations are focusing on and where are some of the leaders getting to?
What's interesting is that it is different based on industry and company size. Unsurprising, right? So, for example, in professional services space, we've been doing a lot of research in that particular area, accounting, global accounting firms specifically, and they're very, very strong in technology. They're very strong in culture. They're very weak in customer understanding, measurement, and design, right? And so, as we look at that, well, we have a tool to show them exactly where they have opportunities to improve. Interestingly, the CXPA membership in general, which was the foundation for the presentation that I made there, they're very strong in general in customer understanding, design innovation, and measurement. But then some of the other areas, data technology, business processes, culture, a little weaker, though culture is a little stronger for the CXPA membership. But that knowledge allows a CX leader and executive leadership to look holistically across those keys, across those capabilities, and say, if we want to consistently deliver great customer, employee, partner experiences, we need to bring our skill levels up or at least link those things better than we're doing today.
It encourages a more holistic view across the organization and getting people to collaborate on those improvement opportunities.
Yeah, and as you saw in the diagram of the 8 keys, the human is at the center. And we talk about, the superpower of the experience operating system is helping get people across the organization working together in alignment to business goals and to customer goals, and doing so consistently and making it part of the what's in it for them and part of their kind of daily, the way that they work and think on an ongoing basis.
You talk about, humans at the center. That was obviously a lot of my focus recently with Bruce Temkin on the podcast when I had him on talking about humanity and scale. And what I'll encourage people to do is to like and follow the podcast if you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes from Michael or Bruce or others. Um, you also put a lot of emphasis on emotion throughout the book. Putting humans in the center links to that. Talk to us a little bit more about like why emotion is so important and how that plays in the across the keys.
You probably know this stat better than I do, but I think it's like 80% of buying decisions are influenced by emotion. And this isn't just B2C, by the way. This is anybody who buys from an organization, interacts with an organization, has a relationship with an organization is by definition, well, at least as of where we sit today in 2025, a human, right? That may shift in a few years, but um, at the moment, humans are responsible for driving value in organizations, and we are inherently emotional creatures. And given that, the fact that so much of a buying decision is based on emotion, and that typically, and this isn't, blanket statement across all organizations, but emotion is taken into account in the strategy and planning phase more often than not, developing personas, initial journeys, things of that nature. But what isn't taken into account as much is the fact that emotion isn't something that's a one-time thing. You don't build a persona, try and figure out how to humanize your customers with that tool. Emotion occurs at every stage of the buying journey, every stage of the service journey, across every organizational relationship, every set of interactions. So what we advocate is, when we talked about that I'll call it a measurement ladder. It's really a metrics framework. It's that second piece, what we do to our customers at the bottom, and then how do our customers feel as a result. It's tracking those feelings throughout the relationships. It's using that lens to help you figure out what are the moments of truth and how do people feel as a result of that. And then laddering those emotional drivers on an ongoing basis up to what people do as a result of that, and then laddering those back up to business results.
This is super important, and this really resonates with me a lot, so much that it actually influenced the name of my own book and podcast, which are both called The CX and Culture Connection. And for me, Michael, the culture connection with CX is because human behavior in an organization is what delivers the emotional peaks in the customer journey. So the culture of your employee, culture is about behavior. It's about mindsets and rituals and behaviors and how things get done. But ultimately, your behavior of your people is what makes your mission, vision, purpose, and strategy come to life. And it's actually the peaks in the customer journey when you map out the customer journey for your personas. Those peaks are where it's meaningful and memorable. It's where the emotions are most resonant, and it's actually your employee behaviors that deliver those peaks often. It's, increasingly you can have digitally orchestrated peaks, but the ones that are most emotionally engaging are still by and large human to human interactions. And that's actually a function of your culture. So that's what I'm really passionate about. And it was good to see, the connection you put on emotion, and I'm interested to talk more about how you think about measuring emotion and then applying that on a more consistent basis versus a one-time thing, because I think that's a very powerful way to approach things.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, and interesting you talk about the fact that humans are responsible for delivering the experiences that create emotions. But what's interesting, and we've seen this consistently because we measure emotion as just part of our way of doing business, right? Because emotion is as important as you know the ease or the effectiveness of any individual interactions. How do you feel as a result of that, and how do you break that feeling down? But sometimes when I'm teaching, I'll ask a question when I introduce the concept of customer experience, like how many people in this room have ever been so upset at a computer or at the voice tree when you're trying to solve a problem or talk to an organization that you've yelled, and almost everyone, myself included, puts their hand up and says, "I get really frustrated at digital touch points or IVRs." But the fact is that those frustrations are driven by decisions that people made behind the scenes to cause those systems to behave that way. And so, exactly to your point, the one-on-one interaction, absolutely, the peaks and valleys. But many people in organizations who are like behind the scenes don't think of themselves as being frontline to CX, right? The legal team. It's like, okay, legal team, have you ever encountered, not in your job here, but in your real life, your personal life, a contract that was confusing to you? Have you ever received a bill? Or I'm talking to the accounting team. Have you ever received a bill or an invoice that wasn't clear what you're being charged for? And everyone says yes. So you are, even though you're not, face to face with the customer on a daily basis, you are absolutely responsible for how your customers feel, and you can change that.
What you're highlighting is they're both direct and indirect impacts on the journey. And the indirect impact is the way your people collaborate and the way they work on designing the experience, the way they set policies. Like these all have impacts on the customer experience, even if they're not directly touching a customer with their own human to human interaction.
Yeah, but that's the mindset skill set. The mindset is that no matter where I am in the organization, have responsibility for delivering great customer experience. And then the organization needs to help me as an individual understand how my actions relate to my roles, or how my role relates to my actions and my behaviors in ways that make sense for me personally. So you can't just, paste the customer experience on or spread it on. It's like, how do you make it real for everyone in the organization so they know not only what's important for the customer, but what's in it for them?
What Michael and I are talking about right now are ways that organizations can make experience part of the winning strategy, how they can embed experience into the way they approach customer and employee experience together. Let's take a quick minute to look at a few of the mastermind groups that I've been launching with some colleagues on these topics, and we'll come back and continue the conversation on the other side. Allow me to briefly interrupt the podcast to share an invitation for you to join one of our mastermind groups. These groups are for leaders building out the CX function at their organization. They are for culture champions looking to develop and sustain behaviors that bring their organization's mission, vision, purpose, and values to life. I'm excited to team with Randy Rothenberg, former CEO of the IAB, on a mastermind group focused on experience as a winning marketing strategy. I'm teaming with Tamar Cohen, who has led CX and EX teams at Zoetis and Travelers, on another group focused on CX EX alignment, and with Greg Kilstrom, host of the Agile Brand podcast, on a group focused on building a self-funding growth flywheel. Each group meets monthly for 90 minutes. Members receive a coaching hour each month and can attend quarterly workshops. Go to JourneySpark's website for more information. Please DM me on LinkedIn with any questions. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Michael, one of the things that we've been talking about is how to drive change in organizations, and how, getting the different keys to approach them holistically and get people to collaborate is so important to driving change in an organization. I'd like to steer us a little bit towards how AI is impacting that, and what you're seeing from your vantage point in your research and work with clients. How is AI, um, you know, how does approaching the keys in the right way help companies get more value from AI, or other ways that you'd like to approach this?
It's still early days, clearly in CX and in business with AI, but the places we're seeing it have the greatest impact, I'll say there's two spots, and this is a broad generalization. There's many more than two, but on the one side, it's increasing efficiencies. How do you help organizations do things more effectively, more quickly than they're doing them today? And some of that may well be replacing human interactions at certain points. A lot of it is actually freeing up humans to do the things that humans do best, which is delivering those actual personal interactions, informed by AI, so they'd be more effective in those interactions. For example, I did a podcast with the CEO of Question Pro, and what they're doing is they're using, Viv and his team are using AI to essentially, or they have used it to ingest years worth of, customer questions, build it out into an internal framework that they can then use for their customer success folks to access this accumulated knowledge and answer questions that they know are going to come up. So it's freeing their people up to be more human more often without having to interact with systems. Analyzing data, driver analysis on an ongoing basis. Those are the things that can be done insanely fast and really effectively, provided, of course, you have the appropriate systems in place to double check the results every time you do it. Um, and then the other area that we're seeing AI come into play broadly is in the actual delivery of experiences. So more relevant, more personalized, faster at scale. So if you think about the imperative from the business perspective of being able to deliver personalized experiences in ways that connect to your customers' needs in that moment on the journey, what are they trying to accomplish? What's the next best action that we as an organization can take to help them move along that journey more quickly? AI is doing some really remarkable things in those specific areas, like automating journeys, or multiple different variations of a journey based on customers' behaviors, and figuring it out in the instant and serving them up the next best thing.
It's interesting, like, before the Chat GPT took off like a rocket ship, there was a lot of interest in AI, but a lot of it was more algorithms for personalization, like at Netflix or at Amazon. That's been around for a while. Or synthesizing data for customer listening in call centers, or summarizing things. It's just gotten so much better. Like, the pace of improvement over the last few years has accelerated dramatically. Where do you see some of the, like, most valuable use cases today in your work in applying AI? Where have you seen some of the more immediate traction?
I think that the areas that we discussed, journey optimization, journey management, um, uh, increasing internal teams efficiency. If I was to kind of point an optimistic view, I would say is freeing up as we discussed a moment ago, freeing up humans to do the things that humans are best at. Of course, there's the flip side of that as well, which is that AI is going to be, you know, pushing employees out the door. And there's no doubt that those employees that don't shift ways of thinking and working um, are in greater danger of being made redundant, as they say. But I do think that the opportunity for AI is to actually, again, the optimistic view of it is to allow more human interactions by taking those things that humans have to do today that are, less valuable, and handing those off to AI to help enable them.
I think two really good examples of what you're describing of like augmenting and empowering humans to do more. One is the opportunity. You were talking about this a little bit, I think, with Question Pro, but it's much broader than just Question Pro. Is the advances in simulation and being able to have conversations with the AI and mine lots of past research and data. As an example, love to get your thoughts on this. I recently had Nitin Shire, the CEO of Wevo, on the podcast, and we presented together at CXPA, Nitin and I, about AI-driven personas, and the what we're talking about in the podcast, in the place we're teaming now is how you can they've taken it like hundreds of thousands. They've done like a million plus user tests that people, whether it's a new product launch or a website change or a mobile app. So they've got, just like you talked about past survey results, they've got lots and lots and lots of user tests that they can actually map them to personas based on data. Like who do they think your persona is on the site? Or you can load a persona and engineer the prompt based on a persona you create, and then it will try to find people in the user history who are like the people in your persona. So it's not just general mining of the data. And it will actually simulate how those people would respond to a website or a product launch or a marketing campaign or whatever. It's basically a content experience. The reason why I think it's so powerful is it allows you to bring the humans, the customer, into the room whenever your proverbial customer in the room, like the empty chair with Amazon. So like you can actually say, what, if I'm going to do something now, I can test it in minutes. And this actually allows human beings to do more exploration and what if and testing, which in the past took time and money. And now you can get an 80% answer in 5 minutes. And you can always do more in depth research to validate and go further. But this is something that was in previously based on intuition and human judgment. And now you have AI as a companion to simulate. It makes the humans actually more powerful, more capable to have this human understanding.
There's a recent project we worked on where we brought AI into an organization that had about 6 million customer base, and completely reframed the way that they looked at segmentation as an organization using AI and ML, more traditional machine learning, which is stuff that you and I have been using for many, many, many years, prior to large language models and ChatGPT. But the reality is that, exactly to your point, you can look at data sets and pull new information out of those data sets that lets humans think about things in new ways, and then test against those data sets your assumptions to see what works best.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The way you're accelerating that learning loop and also empowering more people in the organization to be part of the efforts, and I know, as you talked on earlier, it can help drive collaboration across more parts of the organization around the data. Another area I think there's been a lot of near-term application is training and learning and development. What have you seen with AI there?
um, I haven't had, so I've been thinking about this a lot. We do a lot of executive education, organizational training. We haven't done as much in that area. So I don't know if I can give you specific use cases or examples, but I have opinions.
Well, I think in this, I'm interested. You went to executive ed. I was thinking, I think that's true, and I'd like to come back to that. I was thinking initially, like it started more with QA and call centers, and then what we're starting to see is more of a frontline employee more broadly, where because a lot of these conversations are now recorded because they're on Zoom or, so where you have emails. So a lot of the playbook you can take in a call center where you identify the emotions you want, the behaviors you want. You can then actually listen to the calls to see and train the model to be less of a generic off the shelf QA model and start to see whether you're actually getting the behaviors and emotions you want. And this can be applied to the journey more broadly as long as you have a data signal. Um, so I think there's a lot of training applications of AI that extend beyond QA that we're starting to see emerge. And I do think you'll start to see this in leadership things with like interviewing. I've seen it with like interviewing and hiring and performance appraisals where you can simulate for leaders, but I think that we're just scratching the surface with behavior and learning.
Yeah. Well, as we look at the kind of the distribution of, again, broadly speaking, the distribution of different individuals across an organization, it's a standard distribution curve. On the left side of it, just say, for instance, it's the executive leadership team. And it's a very small part of the population that influences that middle section broadly. On the far right of that, it might be the folks who are actually involved with designing and delivering customer experience. But to the culture part of the culture in the name of your podcast, if you can't shift that middle, it's very difficult to get the organization to actually systematically deliver customer experiences in a different way. And so the applications of AI that we've seen specifically are in helping the executive teams to understand what's happening in the middle of the organization, whether it's in call center or claims or sales, whatever those areas are, but ingesting the information, for example, sales calls. How do you help an organization understand, oh, the sales teams that are most effective aren't doing the things that we're training our organization's sales teams to do? They completely change. Like,
You used a bell curve. Um, I had Chris Taylor, the CEO of Actionable, on the podcast. It's the software that we use for culture and behavior adoption on the podcast. And Chris has this framework I love, Michael, called the triple double, um, which is let's put it up on the screen. You can see in the bell curve that like the middle of the curve is like most of the people embrace some of the behaviors some of the time. Right. So once you identify what the behaviors are you want in your culture in the organization, it'll typically follow a bell curve if you have the data that some of the people engage in all of the behaviors all of the time, and they're on the far right of the bell curve. And some of the people engage in none of the behaviors any of the time, and they're called hiring mistakes, right? And the ones in the middle, which is the vast majority of people, engage in some of the behaviors some of the time, right?
yeah,
And what you want to do is shift the curve. Like what you're talking about is, how do you get more of the people to engage in more of the behaviors more of the time? Now, what's interesting now is it's no less of a theoretical exercise than it used to be because you can identify the behaviors you want. That's the starting point, right? You
yeah.
talked about at the front end of the process. What are the emotions you want? What are the behaviors that get you those emotions? Journey maps are still a very valuable tool. Like with one insurance client, we mapped out the journey and we identified the peaks in the journey and the emotions at the peaks and the behaviors. There were 14 cultural behaviors that evoke those emotions that they've aligned on. And then the question is, how do you drive adoption of those behaviors, right? Now there are more data signals to listen for whether you're getting the behaviors. And you can also use tools to nudge people and drive check-ins and journaling and other change management practices, like whether it's recognition and rewards or mentoring or storytelling or performance management, whatever it is to drive behavior adoption, right? And now you can create a continuous improvement loop.
And just as we're talking about journey optimization for customers, you can also do employee journey optimization, which is something we've done a fair amount of work with, particularly in the technology sector. We're a couple of different very large organizations, but helping them organizationally understand as they want to move people or understand, does somebody excel as an individual contributor? Do they want to remain an individual contributor? Just for example, rather than the mindset that some organizations have is that it's everybody wants to kind of move up the ladder. I want to move from being an IC to a manager and then a manager of managers. The reality is understanding the behaviors that people are is at an individual level best suited for, and that match there with them, what's in it for me as an individual, allows you across that journey to help individuals, not just cohorts or groups of employees, but individual employees to achieve their best, their best selves in the context of their job, serving the company best and serving their individual needs the best. And to your point, it goes back to understanding the behaviors that they need to exhibit, understanding what they want as employees out of their relationship with the organization, and where they want to go personally across that journey. And AI obviously is a piece of that, but more broadly, it's really understanding employees as internal customers as well.
You made culture one of the 8 keys, but doesn't it really, and then you position this way, as enabling the others. And so how do you think of that 8th key? Is it supporting and cutting across the others? I know you've got a circle with it, one of 8, but I've always thought of culture as cross-cutting across the other elements rather than a separate thing. How do you think about it?
Much as journeys are presented in a linear fashion for the most part, they're presented in a linear fashion to help people understand, you know, we're programmed to say, oh, you go from here to here to here to here. And presenting journey maps in a framework that says here stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, that's how we see that. So using that as an analogy, the 8 keys are presented as individual standalone keys to help organizations understand, oh, strategy, we need measurement, right? We need culture is important. But the reality is that it's just a big messy Venn diagram. so all of these, every single key at different ways, at different times, in different parts of the organization has relationships with every other key. So to your point, culture is not over here, right? Culture is front and center. It cuts across everything else. Culture is an enabler of everything to happen in the organization. You have to get people to think and behave in ways that align with your values, your strategy, your vision as an organization, and consistently deliver experiences to your customers that are aligned with what your brand promise is.
I also really loved in your book is the way you picked up on the connection between CX and brand promise. They're really uh, two sides of a coin. Lou Carbone helped me think about this. He was on an earlier podcast. Been a great friend and mentor over the years. That like he calls it the brand canyon, Michael, and it's a great phrase. That like the gap between your CX and your brand, and that brand is what you want customers to say about you, and CX is how they feel about themselves. And there's a gap often between what customers are actually feeling and the emotions that are really going on and what we want them to say about the brand, the experience that we want to evoke, and then have them describe the brand. And if you focus all on the brand about me, and how you describe me, you miss the way you make them feel.
Yeah. And many organizations, right? So we look at it as a continuum. It's what's your business strategy? How does your business strategy influence your brand and how you promise, what you promise to your customers? And then the experience is the degree to which you do or don't deliver on that promise to your customers. And that's the gap, right? The gap is between what customers expect as a result of your brand. Like if your brand is, low prices, great value, and people come into your store or in your online, there's like, wow, these are really expensive. That's really, not a very great product. Then guess what? You've lost them and they don't feel good about.
It's congruence, right? Like, is it congruent? They're two sides of a coin. And if you don't deliver congruence, you have negative emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've all had them, right? And it's like, what are these guys? They're not giving me what I expected, right? It's that gap between, your expectations and the reality of interacting with an organization.
It's been wonderful chatting, and we can go on for a while, but I want to bring things to a close. Is there anything else, any last parting advice you have about folks in how they, apply the book, or what you're hoping people will get out of applying the book that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah. I think I'd say there's one underlying principle which we want to communicate, which is that, and we talked about this earlier, right? That customer experience is more of a discipline than a thing. It's not a project. It's a program that rolls over time, and there isn't an end to it. And you need to have the systems in place to allow you to understand where and how you are delivering experiences and what you need to do to improve them. What are the 10 things that are most important for you on a quarterly basis or annual basis or whatever, right, your business rhythm is. But it's a constant improvement, and improvement based on data from and about your customers and the ways you interact with them. So hence the experience operating system. It is a system. It's different than an operating model. It kind of helps to, it overlays your operating model, so to speak, but it's not something that you as an organization, if you want to be truly customer centric, if that's part of your, part of your business strategy, it's not something that you can do on a one-off basis. And it's not something you can do in silos.
I know you sparked a lot of great ideas for me. I know you have for the audience. If folks want to get in touch with you, is LinkedIn the easiest way? Should they go to MCorpCX website? What's the best way for people to reach out?
I say reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'll drop my link in the program here, but that's a great way to reach me. And I look forward to chatting with anybody, answering any questions. Always happy to have a conversation.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Michael. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation and look forward to seeing you at events and hopefully finding ways we can collaborate.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt.